I say things, but everything in front of me is in slow motion.
Ask the Hosts, episode 33. I'm Joe.
And I'm Gary.
Hello, Gary. Just the two of us this time. The idea of this show is very simple. You send in your questions to us, show@askthehost.com, and we answer them. The catch is that can be about anything except Linux and open source. Before we get going, thank you to everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. And remember that people on Patreon get these episodes 2 weeks before everyone else. The first question then. Colin asks, what's the best museum you've been to?
I've not been to any museums that aren't focused around kids in the last few years, so I struggle to give an answer to this, although if you happen to be in the north of Ireland, then W5 in Belfast is a pretty good one to go to for kids. It's like an interactive science museum in a way that the London Science Museum could never be for toddlers and kids aged under 5. But as an adult, I really liked this museum in Amsterdam called Micropia, which was the Museum of Microbes. And I don't know, there were just loads of really cool exhibits about germs and the biggest ant farm I'd ever seen, with like ants carrying leaves all around the place and things. It was just pretty cool to sit and watch. Or maybe I sampled too many local substances. Don't know.
Yeah, that does sound quite Amsterdam, doesn't it? What's your beef with the Science Museum in London then?
Inshitification, or maybe it's just not as cool as it seemed when I went there as a kid. I think there's just so much of it that's closed off to the public now, unless you pay extra or have some kind of special pass. Whereas I remember when I was a kid, it being this sprawling metropolis of really interesting things to look at and tech products that I'd seen in my grandparents' house or that my dad had when he was a kid, which I guess is why I'd have seen them in my grandparents' house, come to think of it. And it just doesn't seem like that anymore. Now, whether that's because I've gotten older and I've been there many times, or it genuinely has just had more and more bits closed off and more paid exhibits, I don't know. But I wouldn't say I have beef with it. It's just not as cool as I once thought it was.
Yeah. Well, I have been there and I was very disappointed with it because me and my wife decided to have a kind of trip to central London, do all of the museums day. And this must have been about 10 years ago, maybe. And so we went to the Science Museum and just weren't in there very long. It just seemed to be very kid focused, which I guess is good if you've got kids. But for us, it just wasn't that interesting to me. And we went to the British Museum, which is, all our plunder from the empire. And that was just ultimately not that interesting to me either. And my wife said, I'm not going near the mummies because they've got actual mummies, like in glass cases, which I remember I went to the British Museum as a kid with my parents and I was just really freaked out. Like, that's literally a dead person, like just lying there. Like, it might be, a mummy, it might be 2,000 plus years old, whatever, or probably older than that, but it's still a dead person. And that's really disrespectful to have them just lying there in a glass case. And I just didn't like it then.
Yeah. I mean, the thought of stealing a human being and putting them in a museum, when you think of it on that level, is pretty messed up.
Yeah, it's just like it's a dead person, like, let them rest in peace and all the rest of it. But anyway, so when we went to the British Museum, about 10 years ago, my wife said, I'm not going anywhere near it. And at one point, we ended up kind of in the labyrinth of it all. And like, there was no way through except going past the mummies. And so we had to like backtrack all the way around and like go down these stairs and up these other stairs. And it took about like 10 minutes plus to get around that specific bit. So that kind of tainted the experience for us. But what else did we go to on that day? What are the other museums around there?
There's the Natural History Museum, the V&A. They're all in that same sort of Exhibition Road area.
Oh, yeah. So we went to the Natural History Museum, and that's pretty cool. They've got the skeleton, or the model at least, of a blue whale skeleton, and that is like, just the scale of it is amazing. And yeah, that was pretty cool. All of the other stuff in there, I remember that being good. But then we went to the V&A because my wife wanted to go. And that's, how do you describe the V&A? Victoria and Albert Museum. It's like all costumes and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it? It's like clothes from the Victorian era and things like that. It's all a little bit strange.
It is, but weirdly, that was probably my favourite of all of those London museums. And I don't know why. There was nothing in particular that I remember, but it just was more interesting for some reason.
Yeah, like I remember going a couple of years ago to the Ulster Folk Museum and thinking, oh, this is just going to be one of these. Here's some exhibits from Northern Ireland in the 1700s and 1800s. But when I got there, realizing that it was literally a village where they had deconstructed, moved and rebuilt buildings from various eras of Ireland's history. So actually, this is fascinating. Like, not only from a how on earth have you like deconstructed and moved a pub and rebuilt it exactly how it was, but also just looking through a row of houses from different eras in history and how people had modified them and stuff. Like, there's something about that seeing how people lived and what people wore and the food they ate, like, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, that does sound cool. One of the more interesting ones that I went to was when I went to Sicily. I stayed in Palermo, or near Palermo, the capital, and I thought I can't go to Sicily without going to Corleone, which of course is famous from The Godfather. And so I went there, and this was in January. It was very much the off season. And I got to Corleone, and there was the Anti-Mafia Museum, not the Mafia Museum, the Anti-Mafia Museum, because they have to be very careful about that. And it wasn't open, but I kind of went in. Well, it was open as in the door was open, but there was no staff, and I couldn't buy a ticket, but I just kind of like wandered in, and they kind of let me wander around a little bit. So that was quite interesting and weird because there was just no one else there, because not many people go to Sicily in January as a tourist. So yeah, I think that was probably the most interesting. But yeah, the V&A I think was the one that I enjoyed the most. Radu asks, who is the person you most admire? It could be from the past or present.
I had to think quite hard about this, and I'm going to have a bit of a cringe answer, but I think it's probably my granddad on my dad's side, because he taught me a lot of stuff and was quite a harsh but fair person. And I think that has taught me quite a lot about not necessarily how I want to bring up my own kids, but about how sticking out something and being disciplined and just getting on with it, I guess, in the face of adversity, sometimes is actually quite a powerful thing to do.
Yeah, I get that. And like, I could say something similar about like my dad maybe, but I'm going to struggle to give you an answer here, because the problem is anybody you admire is going to let you down, because everyone lets you down in the end. Like, there's always going to be some flaw. I'm not saying like catastrophically let you down, but, you know, I think about historical figures and, you know, artists, musicians, actors, all the rest of it. Like, they always turn out to have pretty serious flaws about them. I suppose you can admire people who aren't perfect, but maybe I'm seeking perfection in the people I admire. I don't know.
Well, spoiler alert, Jay, no one is perfect, because that isn't how people are. Everyone has some kind of flaw. People get angry. People get sad. People do all sorts of stupid shit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person or that there aren't traits about them that you can't admire. I mean, like my granddad, for example, had a terrible temper if someone got on the wrong side of him. But equally, I think about all of the good traits that he had. And by and large, in my relationship with him, those outweighed the bad, but someone else might have an entirely different perception of him.
I suppose. I mean, if you asked me, like in the tech space, Cory Doctorow, I suppose I admire him. Molly White, I admire her. But like, I know that now I've said that, some character flaw is going to come to light, and I'm just going to look stupid for saying it.
But based on the information you have right now, you can say that. And you admire what you know right now. If it turns out that one of them has some serious, awful thing that they've done, or Molly White turns out to have been a troll this entire time and actually really loves LLMs and stuff.
And crypto, yeah, she's got like, you know, she is Satoshi, yeah.
Yeah. You didn't know that at the time that you said you admired her, and that might change your opinion of her. But that doesn't mean that you can't look up to what she's doing in that space right now.
Yeah. But, you know, I look at historical figures, like a lot of older people in this country would say Winston Churchill, for example, as, you know, this great leader who got us through World War II. But, like, he was very flawed as an individual. And I don't think that I could bring myself to admire him.
No, but then it depends on what you look at, doesn't it? It's very rose-tinted spectacles about some of that stuff. And those people are probably more in admiration of strong leadership qualities and stuff like that than they are necessarily looking at character flaws or his politics or whatever else it is that you might take issue with.
Mm. So I don't know. I think I'm going to just give the non-answer of I don't know, sorry. Stefan asks, what was your longest or best or weirdest train ride? I'm hoping you're going to say like you went all across from, I don't know, Spain to China or something, but something tells me it's going to be, I don't know, Norwich to London.
Well, I've spent a lot of time commuting on trains for this to be at all interesting. Like, I've done London to Manchester or Edinburgh or various other really boring train rides. And I've done the Eurostar a couple of times. I just haven't found any of the rides on trains particularly interesting. I would really love to be one of these people who could tell you that I've done like Miami to Seattle on Amtrak or something, and maybe one day I'll do that. Like 100 hours on a train with food and meeting interesting people sounds great, but the reality is that trains for me have just been a thing to commute or get to a destination. And sometimes they're better than flying. Like if I wanted to go somewhere in Western Europe, I would probably just get the train now because I end up in the center of the city I want to be in and not in an airport 30 miles away.
Yeah.
But they're just very much a means to an end. Like I could probably tell you a few different models or types of train that I've been on, but I don't know, they're just not that interesting to me because I spent so much time sitting on them on a laptop, watching the world go by, or being given cans of beer if I sat in first class.
Yeah, same for me. I've not been on that many trains over the years. I've been to, I think just over the channel, I think to Calais, or whatever the nearest station is on the Eurostar. And that's quite cool to like be on a train from London and you're just going through the British countryside. And then suddenly you're just in this tunnel for a while. And you think like, I'm literally under the sea. That's not that common. I don't think there are many trains in the world that go under the sea. So that, I suppose, is like the weirdest train ride I've done.
Yeah, and then you pop out and you're like, oh, I'm in France. And then within 20 minutes, I'm in Belgium. Like, that is pretty cool. And getting off and just being in the centre of Brussels after getting off a train, there's something nice about that that is very different to getting off the train at Manchester Piccadilly when you get on at Euston.
Yeah, which I've done many times as well. It's funny that mainland Europeans just take that for granted of just going to another country on a train. Whereas for us, we had to like dig this massive tunnel and make a big thing of it.
Yeah, it's pretty novel. It's a different country, different culture, different language. You just don't get that here. I get off the train in Manchester and there's a Greggs, and there was a Greggs when I got on the train in Euston. Yeah. There's just not that diversity of culture that I can get to without flying to most places is the reality.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons that doing one of those really long, epic journeys on something like Amtrak appeals to me, is just experiencing like that diversity of landscape and culture and people whilst also being in a moving vehicle. Like, that's quite cool and is something that I could never really experience in the UK.
Well, I had a fairly long journey a couple of times up to the northeast of England. And it's funny. You get on at London and you're on this like normal fast train, and then you have to make a couple of changes. And the first change is like down to a sort of slightly shittier train. And then the last one is literally a train where you have to open the doors and close the doors yourself. They're not like automatic or anything like that. And it feels like just this rickety tram or something. And then when you do the reverse, you're kind of getting better and better trains. So that's a weird experience to do that compared with, you know, the Eurostar where it's this super modern train city to city. Or even just going to Manchester, it's just one train. So I don't know, that felt weird. So that was kind of the weirdest. And I think the best has got to be Eurostar, definitely.
And the train, dear listener, that Joe was describing is called a pacer, which is literally a bus with train wheels on.
Pretty much, yeah.